You're live.
So good afternoon, everyone. We are here for the Pillar 4 Committee meeting for today for AIB. And so first, I just want to make sure that if we could do welcome and introductions of everybody. My name is Hope McGuire, and I am the supervisor of community schools actually in MCPS. I will pass it to Ellie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellie Mitchell. I'm the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network, and we also house the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools. And I will pass it to Shalita.
Hi, my name is Shalita Jones, and I'm a school-based speech language pathologist.
Go right ahead, Joseph.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Joseph Manko. I am the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation and also a board member of the Accountability and Implementation Board.
Is it Arshia?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Arshia Sethi Snowden. I am the Outreach and Communication Director at the AIB. Lisa, do you want me to do my full intro now, or do you want me to wait a little bit?
Wait a little bit,
Okay,
please.
I got you.
And then I see Caden.
Hi, I'm Kadeen, and I'm the student member on the board for Caroline County.
Thank you. And so at this time, we'll do the updates for chair and vice chair announcement. Is that for you, Lisa, or for me?
It's for me. Yes, because we have to officially welcome you all as and announce you, Hope, as the new chair of the Pillar 4 Advisory Committee. And we have to also let everyone know that Vice Chair Ellie Mitchell will graciously continue on in her role in supporting the committee. And we want to thank you all in advance for your leadership and your commitment.
Thank you. And I just want to say I'm excited to support Ellie. We work very closely in many different other places. And then also to work with our new members that we met at the last meeting. So great to have you. And then I'll let you go to the next one.
All right. Continuing on with good news, now I would like to formally introduce our new team member of the AIB, Arshia Sethi Snowden, to the Pillar 4 Advisory Committee members. She will be and is our Outreach and Community Communications Director, and we are so lucky to have her. So go ahead, Arshia, take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, Pillar 4 Advisory Committee. Excited to meet all of you officially. My name, as mentioned, is Arshia Sethi Snowden. I started as the Outreach and Communications Director at the AIB about 2 months ago. I wanted to introduce myself to all of you just so you all get familiar with me. I'm going to be working a lot on creating materials and partnerships to further spread the knowledge and overview of what Blueprint is doing in terms of implementation and a lot of what the advisory committees are doing. So I will be definitely reaching out to all of you for feedback as well as input and uplifting any success stories that you've seen specifically around Pillar 4. So just look out for some outreach from me in the coming months, and excited to see all the incredible work that you all do on this advisory committee.
Thank you and welcome.
Okay, now to go into the updates from the AIB. We have some hiring updates. We will be recruiting and hiring for the following positions in the near future: fiscal analyst, government relations director, policy analyst for Pillar 1, early childhood education, and a policy analyst for Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers. And those applications will open soon. In the meantime, interested candidates can go onto the AIB website and click join our team and follow the instructions to submit their resumes. Next, the board approved the request for extension of the special education work group during their meeting earlier this month. The work group will now have until May 30th to finish its very daunting work and have a report ready by December 1st with their current recommendations. And then it also allows the work group to continue its work for at least another 6 months. The extension will allow the work group to submit any additional documents after that date, but to continue to meet quarterly through the year and to receive updates on the progress of the implementation of its very necessary recommendations. And now, in going into the topic of our agenda today, all 24 LEAs submitted their blueprint implementation plans, which covered areas for criteria for success across the pillars. All LEA plans can be found on the AIB website under the Implementation Plan tab, then clicking on the LEA Blueprint Implementation Plan link. And that will be needed for our discussion today. And now back to Chair Hope.
Thank you. So I also just linked it in the agenda for everybody, if it was easier for you to walk through and find the plans that way. And our main thing is to look at the Pillar 4 responses through a few of them just to see if you see any trends that are coming up from those plans. So we did get this a little bit earlier if there's anybody who wanted to start a conversation about what we saw with the plans already, or if you need a moment to actually review those, we can do that as well.
And I think we were gonna suggest that you pick your county basically, right? Since there's so many of them. If you haven't looked at it already.
We'll give you all 2 to 3 more minutes to look at your plan from your LEA, and then we will come back for discussion. 30 more seconds.
So at this time, what stands out from your LEA around Pillar 4 that you see that you want to highlight? And I'll let someone else go first.
So I was looking at PG County, and I really, what stood out to me was the fact that they have a program where they're partnering with an immigrant, like student support. So it looks at different cultural adjustments and language barriers, as well as academic support, mental health services. So I think that's amazing in the sense that they are partnering with organizations within the community to help students that are immigrants that will, for that mentoring and also kind of that culture adjustment, because that can be very important as well, especially coming to a new environment. Just like, of course, for us, what are the norms? And what are some things you should expect, especially those, and in addition to those language barriers as well. So that's really what stuck out to me.
Is there anything else that stands out for Kadeen or Ellie? Did you see anything that stood out for you for any of them that you looked at? The one thing I would say for Montgomery County, it kind of goes also to what you just shared about Prince George's County is I only in this work I don't look at just MCPS, but also what does this mean across our 24 LEAs. And so just what we will be pulling to monitor this could look so vastly different because of the demographics in an area, the size of a county, and whether or not that is a true focus of their strategic plan to also look at some of this in the blueprint, because maybe it's not in every LEA the same way. And so one thing that stood out to me was the similar is where we're talking about reaching out for family engagement supports in our EML, for our EML students. And even that language where some people say EMLs for emerging multilingual learner, and some are still saying ELL, some say ESOL still. So some of that common thread and knowledge that we probably need to have a understanding of across all LEAs and what that means in each LEA. And then as someone who works with community schools, I think what stood out to me was when we do updates on this is usually before we get our official list. And so we're submitting what are our current schools, but not the most current for the year that we're probably going into. And so we have a list of current versus projected, and sometimes that projected doesn't even match up. And so making sure that we can have opportunities to update or have updates in that work that actually are aligned. It seems like sometimes we'll get information that is from the blueprint, but then from MSDE, it comes at this time, and funding might come out at this time. And so if we could get a more streamlined support, then we will be able to have a more clear understanding in our plans of when we can execute some of the things that are required for us. Anything else that stood out?
I think, we were just talking before we went live about the webinar that the Maryland Center for Community Schools and MD4CS hosted this past week. And I think one of the things I think I'm seeing it, and I've looked at several of the implementation plans in Pillar 4 around community schools, is still a need to definitely go deeper on understanding of what shared leadership means and of what partnerships look like, and how they service the bigger vision of community schools, so that we're not just ticking, numbers, and we're really getting a little bit more qualitative about it. And I'm wondering how the new needs assessment tool and how that's being implemented across all the LEAs, how that might bring some interest into looking at themes from a state level that could also then trickle down into implementation plans. So I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about how the special education work group recommendations might also impact the special education sides of these implementation plans. So like everything kind of has to feed back into each other, as you were saying. Like it seems like we need ways to make sure that the LEAs have all the resources and information and that they can have from these work groups and from these recommendations as part of their implementation planning. Not to say that they don't. I'm just saying that sometimes it feels like maybe the timing's a little bit off, or there's pieces that are missing from the larger picture. There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences in the counties, of course. So understanding context is important, but I think there's some things that we should, and maybe, the additional questions were very helpful. Obviously, like prior to this, the early implementation plans practically didn't mention community schools at all, because they really weren't asked about that. So these questions are great, but there may be new questions that actually need to be asked in the next round.
I also think that one of the things I see through just the template and then looking at some of the other LEAs, all of it is like 6 degrees of separation. Like it all has some way that it has a connection to it. Because I think when we look at the other part of Pillar 4 around the services, like supporting students' behavioral health, since a big part of that was tied into community schools around wraparound services, us understanding what does that mean across these LEAs. And for us, we are a very large school district that has a very strong group of behavioral health supports, internal and external. But that is not the case in all LEAs. So how could we also look at what is the minimum or the requirement for the state to support all LEAs with what is the foundation, and then everyone else of supplementing above that to make sure that we're getting this to everyone if we really are talking about the blueprint for Maryland's future. I always tell people you never know who your child might marry. It's similar to the school district. You never know where the student might land. So they might be in your LEA one year and be in another one another year, but you want to have some of the same framework foundations. And so I would really like for us to look at those student behavioral health components, and even some of the community school components where it's not just a list or we're just creating an evidence of activities, but this should be more of evidence of impact. And I know our superintendent here mentioned that at our ANS meeting about there's always this list of activities, but we need to start talking about what is the evidence of our impact of this work. And so even on some of the things that are our metrics that we're looking at, are they truly metrics that are going to show impact, or are they metrics that just show that we completed an activity and we can check it off our list saying that we've done that? And so we just got to go a little bit more detail with that. What else stands out for anybody? Is it anything that you would say is definitely something that you want to replicate, or something that you have I wonder about?
Yeah, Hope, I was just gonna piggyback off what you were saying, like just what is the evidence surrounding it? I think that's a really good point of how do we show the impact so that we can implement it into other LEAs and, across the board, because obviously this is working, this is the evidence to support it. But what are the, are we looking at what are the research questions? Like what type of methods are we using? Are we just using like surveys, or are we actually, or student input or community input? So I would like to see something along those lines, kind of like going back what you were saying. Like I would like to see like, okay, give it to me in I like to say black and white, right? So I can see where the evidence, where the charts, like is the attendance higher? I know I saw something in here about chronic absentees. And so how are we measuring that? How are we supporting that within the community? Is it around a certain time? What community supports is needed? Or what do you see as lacking from the community and the school as well? So that we and everybody else can support the LES as well. So I agree with you on that.
And just to kind of piggyback off what you just said, one of the things that made me think when I looked through some of these plans was maybe it would be great as we go through the blueprint cycle to have LEAs send teams based off of their pillars to come together and actually have some conversations, not just the blueprint office in certain areas, but the people who have done the work on the actual responses to come together and have conversations about, was it a particular policy that you had to create to implement certain things in your LEA? Is it already a standard regulation? Or is it just a common practice that you guys have incorporated because, it's just a best practice that actually helps engage your community and family? And we wouldn't have to do it like in one place. It could be by regions where, a group of LEAs come together in a particular area and, Pillar 4 is meeting here, Pillar 1, or, that whole group could come and you spread out. If it's a place like a university we could meet at, to literally have some of these conversations with each other, because I think sometimes we can miss things because we have our own perception of ourselves and what we do well, and we need to actually kind of piggyback and look at best practices in other LEAs, because we might be missing one piece of how to enhance our policy. It could have been just a statement of how it was phrased that actually makes the policy even stronger. And so those are just some of the things that stand out to me. The other one I would say is definitely looking at the special education side, where it talks about our students with disabilities, and where are the cross of that student in other areas. So is it we see more students with disabilities in non-community schools in a particular LEAs, or are they in majority of the community schools that might be in a LEA? Can we get some data around that? What does that quantify to, not in percentage, but actual student number, to see if we are able to then provide correct supports in these areas and in these communities that might actually be the internal and the external working together to support the families that have students with disabilities as well. All through an asset lens, so nothing through deficit mindsets.
My B team could say like what the next steps are from this second set of implementation plans. What are the districts then required to do next around their implementation plans? Is there going to be yet another set of implementation plans? Where are the points on which, like, if we wanted to say, oh, we think there should be a question about this or something like that, what's the next phase of the implementation plan process?
Did you hear that, Joe?
Yeah. So at this point, the plans are in the process of there's been back and forth between the LEA teams and then MSD and the AIB, who are giving joint feedback to go through and make adjustments to the plan to make sure that they meet the criteria for success. I know at this point, a handful of plans have been approved, but not all of them. So there's still some that are, in the process of still receiving feedback and making modifications. But there was a place on the AIB website where, members of the public that were going through and reviewing the plans for their individual LEA could go through and provide some feedback, so that they can either surface questions that were that they wanted to raise, or things that they felt like were either strong in the plans, or things that were lacking in the various LEA plans, so that that information could be taken into account when providing feedback to each of the LEAs to finalize the submission. But for many of these plans, that feedback has already been taken into account. There's been modifications to the plan accordingly, and they've gone through and they have been approved by the recommended for approval by both MSDE and AIB staff, and then ultimately approved by the full board.
And will they have to do, and will they have to do updates to these plans again in next summer? Like submit next spring or next summer?
Yeah, so there was a process for going through and making originally there was a process for going through and approving the plans annually, but I need to go back and look into this, but I think these were there was a elongated amount of time. I think it was 3 years that these plans were approved for. It's kind of the first tranche as we move into the kind of second the second round of implementation. So really this is the this is the plan for that has been approved for a period of longer than 1 year, with probably some slight updates and modifications going throughout. But for the most part, these are the plans that have been approved for the 3-year timeframe.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think so much of that makes sense because there's a lot of work that goes into these plans. There's a lot that goes into implementation, and as with anything that we're doing in education, it's a continuous improvement process, and we're going through and making slight adjustments to to go through and refine the process. But I think each of these LEAs has kind of put a stake in the ground that these are things that we are working towards, and we need you need a more elongated time frame than just 1 year in order to put these these robust plans into motion and have everything building up to the ultimate outcomes that we're all working towards.
I would say the other thing that stands out for these plans is, and then for the blueprint period, is just the fiscal lift that it's going to take. And making sure that we understand that could look totally different because of size, demographics, location. If you're in a more rural area, you might need to actually get certain services out to you that are not currently in your area. And so I'm hoping that that is taken into consideration when we're looking at some of the implementation of the things that people have, because that could hold up a lot of it as well. Is it anything else that stands out for anyone on these?
I'm also looking at like the professional development as well when it comes to students with disabilities. Here's my 2-second rant on it. looking at it from a point of, yes, you do want the instructor to be effective, but we also have to look at what are these strategies, who were they normed on? Because if you're considering the population in which you're trying to teach, we have to be flexible in giving different avenues based on instruction, based on the population. And so we can't get frustrated when this intervention is not working. Why is it not working? Maybe because it was the norm on this population that you're trying to feed it to, quote unquote. And so I would love to see like maybe more support or maybe more detail when it comes to what type of instructions, when it comes to professional development, because we've all been in professional developments and sometimes we're listening, sometimes we're not. And so what is going to be most impactful? And that is the part of where we really need to take into consideration the teacher input as well. I know sometimes we get up in these higher positions and sometimes we get so far removed because we're not in the classroom or we're not into the day-to-day. And so like really take into account maybe having a teacher on board or something like that to really phone in on what is happening in the classroom, what's going to be effective, because you may present them with intervention that has worked in maybe the Midwest, but it may not work. And I'm just speaking for PG because that's what they have. It may not work in PG County. So maybe a little bit more detail in some of these, what are the interventions or what are the instructions that you're trying to implement? What are the professional developments that's really going to be impactful for the teachers who are really doing the day-to-day, hour by hour, minute by minute instructions especially with students with disabilities?
I would add a little bit even more to that. One of the things I think Ms. Snowden, you're getting ready to see is that we also need to use the connections between the pillars to actually support the blueprint for future. So what I mean by that is college and career readiness in a pillar, we should be literally advertising the blueprint to high school students to get them to understand that there is a shortage of positions that are needed in Pillar 4, such as special education teachers and those that are in the human service field to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, mental health therapists of all kinds, because that is something in the state of Maryland right now. We're actually coming to almost a very dry candidate pool because we have literally hired who is available, but we're not advertising it probably as much. And we do have some pathways that actually where universities are working with LEAs around pathways for social work, pathways for school counseling, some for psychology, but really have we looked at this from these are ways the blueprint can continue to be supported through another pillar by saying, hey, these are careers that if you could highlight from your pillar to these students, we could literally be impacting the great work that's coming along in Pillar 4 or in Pillar 2 or 3, getting them to understand the different intersections of the work that is needed for the workforce to be developed here in Maryland as well. Hi, Dr. Grant. We are just reviewing LEA plans that were submitted and just looking through Pillar 4 responses. Is there anything else for anyone that stands out?
Yeah, Hope, I just want to elevate, as I've gone through, the various plans, I think one of the things that I've really appreciated is, the way that the plan submissions were outlined is, there's a frame, by responding to the questions, there's a framework that allows the LEAs to focus on some core facets of the blueprint implementation. But I think in comparison to the plans that were submitted last year, there was enough flexibility amongst each of the plans for amongst how the submissions were structured, so that each of the plans feels very unique to that locality. That it gave enough freedom and space for creativity, so that each of the LEAs could go through and really articulate, how they were going to internalize, how they were going to operationalize what was outlined in the blueprint. So, in that sense, it's nice because, it's really like, if you look at each of the plans, it's not a cookie cutter, right? Like every single submission looks, it's guided by, by a general framework. So there's enough continuity amongst plans as you look across the state, but there's also enough flexibility where each of the plans looks uniquely positioned for that locality, for the unique demographics of the various areas of the state, reflective of both the assets and the challenges that exist in each of the LEAs. So, I just really appreciate the fact that there's a framework in place so that there's enough continuity across all the plans, but also enough freedom and flexibility where each of the plans in each of the LEAs were able to be unique in their submission and really elevate what they felt like was strong and what they were doing well, that fits within the kind of general apparatus that the blueprint has laid out.
Yeah, that's what I kind of liked about it. I remember a former principal I worked with, he used to say that we have the same framework but different curtains. So we have that construction of the house, but everyone gets to pick what you want as your window treatments. And so when you look at the plans and what we've seen so far, and I'm kind of moving a little bit into our meeting topics, what would you want for Pillar 4? Who would you like for us to invite in to actually have these conversations with, to develop and go a little bit deeper in what is in Pillar 4 that we might have been missing? So originally, we did want to bring in someone who could speak to our EML population in schools and what is the requirements in the blueprint. But also we talked about special education. Is there one that you would want to actually have come before the other? Or are we on track with those? Are there anybody else that you would like to have come to our meetings to just make sure that we are bringing guests who can actually not only respond to our questions, but maybe the questions that we get from our constituents?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So when I looked through and I was able to get a hard copy of the blueprint from Maryland, and I'm looking on page 133 where they have implementation considerations. I'm looking at the specifically the last bullet, need for a statewide approach to expansion of two-way immersion programs. That makes me say, what does that look like? To have a two-way immersion program, is it just our normal standard immersion program that we see daily? What levels or things are necessary or needed when you're considering this process? So I guess I would like to have some more information around what that would look like and the implementation of that to show it being done effectively and with fidelity at schools. So just more information around that one.
Okay, we can add that topic in on that day. Is it anything? Yeah, Joe.
Yeah. So I think piggybacking off of what Dr. Grant just said, I wonder if, there are two work groups, one that has already completed and one that's still ongoing, that I think it would be interesting to get either, speakers or people who participate in those work group processes to come and present so that we hear more about what their recommendations were and why they recommended those different you know, kind of plans or adjustments. So one would be someone from the multilingual language learners work group that is already concluded. And then potentially if we could get Liz Zogby, who is the chair of the special education work group. Now their work is ongoing. So, you know, they're kind of midstream, and I think they will come out around December with their findings. But it would be interesting, like in the meantime, to just, you know, hear what they're thinking about and what they're working on, what have been some of the challenges that they've surfaced. So I would recommend, you know, someone from the multilingual learners work group, and then either Liz or someone from the special education work group to come and present to the Pillar 4 work group.
Thank you. Would anybody be interested also in us maybe getting someone from Pillar 5, which is the governance and accountability piece, to come and speak to us about what that looks like, and if it's in the intersections, or what those intersections are with Pillar 4? I see head shake, so yeah, okay.
I think that could be helpful.
So I want to jump in here because as you may be aware, our Pillar 5 Advisory Committee is brand new, hot off the presses, with the approval from the board. And so they have to stand up their committee. But they are all eager to get started. And so potentially give them a little bit of time.
So you're saying spring?
Yes.
I'm with you.
Okay.
And so what we can look at is the ones that we have been asking about, and seeing which one will go first. If someone's available for our October meeting, that would be our next one. Is it one over the other work group, ladies and gentlemen, that you are more interested in coming first? No?
I'm personally interested in the special education one.
Special
I
education.
don't know about the timeline for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if we actually have this, try to hear from the special education work group now, so we can kind of understand what they're doing midstream, and then see if we can have them come back for an update around February or March when the findings have been finalized. And then that way, that probably actually helps them too, because, you know, if there's questions that are coming from the work group that can either be, you know, explored or untangled with the special education work group, then I think that would maybe be helpful for them.
Nice. Okay. So we'll work on getting, seeing if we can get someone from their work group to come on October 22nd, which is our next meeting. And then all I would ask is if we could kind of look through those LEA plans even more deeper for Pillar 4, to look at what was additional trend with the focus on the special education side. So then we have questions ready to go that they might not present to us, that we might be like, can you unpack this a little more about what this might mean? Because they probably have also given some guidance to these different LEAs around that submission, or given feedback as well. And then I'll make sure to send you a little reminder. I like doing those homework reminders. So we have special education, multilingual learner, and then is it anything else that we would like? I would like an update in the winter, so from the community school side, just about some of the we have a new needs assessment. Next month we are supposed to learn about revisions to the implementation plan. And so I think that information needs to be shared back with the group again. Also looking at some of the metrics that we're going to be looking at around community schools, because we want to make sure that they actually are aligned to the work and are based in impact matrices and not activity-based matrices.
Hope, one of my big questions, and again, I'm very confused as to where it stands, is the neighborhood indicators of poverty and how we're counting poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really important one. I don't know what the timeline is. I know that the legislative session, this session sort of added GOC into the mix of people working on that. And I know that they're headlong into enough, which is also something that I think would be interesting to think about from, you know, how it might be impacting and connecting to the blueprint. But the bigger thing for me is how we're counting poverty, because that's huge. It will determine what schools are eligible for concentration of poverty grants. It's just a huge conversation.
Yes.
And I don't know where I haven't heard anything about it recently, about where it stands. And maybe I've missed something. I haven't been watching all the board meetings as I've been in lots of conflicts with being in board meetings. So, but I just haven't heard anything recently. I think GOC is headlong into enough, but I don't know if they're also on parallel tracks working on that as well.
And I'm just making sure, does anyone have an update about the neighborhood indicators of poverty? No, just making sure just in case. Okay. Because that will be one, I have the same question, because if we knew what that is, we probably could have better predictive lists and have a little bit more wraparound startups for those schools that are coming on. For instance, I know for us in MCPS, we got 2 separate lists. One had 10 schools, one had 19, and then we ended up with the 19. And so just to be able to get prepared for that, if we had that a little bit earlier in the year or mid-year of this school year to get ready for next school year, it would actually have us be more proactive and innovative instead of reactive to the work. With getting things up and running for those schools that then go back to that whole process, Ellie, you were talking about shared leadership, but that would also, if we knew about those indicators of poverty, then we would also kind of be able to predict ourselves who probably will be the next group of schools, because our current list of predictive schools is not coming out in some places to what we're actually getting as identified designated schools. We still have 2 more years, but so far some of them are a little off. And so it'd be great to know where we're landing with that poverty indicator. Do we know who?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you know, we've been using hold harmless data for farms data for years ago. I mean, at some point, I don't know anything about the timeline of when that is supposed to happen. Joe, do you have any idea, like, what the next steps are on that?
No, and it's interesting because as you bring it up, I haven't heard about it for several months now. So yeah.
That might be a sign that we need to bring whoever's over that to this committee and just ask the questions. I got it down, Ellie. I got it down. And so just looking at our time, we have figured out the next ones we want. Our next meeting is on October 22nd. And so that one will be from 4 to 5:30. And we really would spend more time like diving into maybe some trends that we do see across the LEA plans for Pillar 4, but knowing that we're looking to have the speakers from the special education work group, and they can have the first part of the meeting to make sure that we can get as much as we can from them, and then we can go into the plans, and then talk about how we want to schedule the other two groups. Maybe we can also see if someone can come in around the neighborhood indicators of poverty. And we merge that meeting with something else that's just an update meeting from the different work groups as well. Are there any other topics that we want to bring up? Is there anybody else that you would like to have come and speak? Whether they are part of another work group or if it's around data collection, communications. Shalita, I see your thoughts.
I was going to say somebody from Pillar 2, just because we're going into special education. And then, you know, we kind of get that, what's going on with them. And then looking at how are they kind of aligning or recruiting, or what are they looking for in those like diverse teachers and high quality teachers, especially when you say that there is a shortage of, especially special education teachers. I think it would be good to kind of hear like, how are they recruiting? How are they, what requirements, like what are they kind of looking for in order to be quote unquote like high quality? And so how is that trickle down to special education too, in those special education teachers as well? So I think it'd be good to like kind of hear from Pillar 2.
Gotcha. Because if you know who you're hiring for, then that makes the world of difference.
Right, exactly.
Anything for you, Dr. Grant?
Nothing else. I'm just perusing through some of the plans, and I noticed some structure differences. I noticed some similarities in things. I have some questions about some things, some wonderings, especially when we look at, I'm looking at one district in particular, one LEA, where they talk about pre-K and the high enrollment numbers in that early childhood. And it makes me wonder around the certification of those educators, and then using private facilities. We know we're not using the KRA anymore. However, when we've used KRA and other data of students coming into the school system, we noticed that there was a big disparity of what they knew and didn't know. So my mind is going all over the place. I have a lot of wonderings around some of the information that has been provided, and then how we can best fit the needs of some of these things so we can show accurate improvement, impact, growth in this blueprint that we're trying to ensure is being implemented with fidelity. So just a bunch of things, Hope. I said a whole lot in a little bit of time, but
No, I think in the next meeting, what we should do is actually, when we're talking about looking at the plans, come with them with the I wondering statements. Like, I'm wondering because I saw this across, half of the plans, this, but not in the other half. What does that mean? So, or have they already met some of that? Because there might be in some areas where they're smaller, or they've already had that as a focus based on who's their superintendent, or what was the, part of their strategic plan that they already had in place. So then we could just have those I wonderings when we have our next meeting, because I know I'm with you on some of the same things, like how do you already have these great connections, and how can we literally replicate some of this to work smarter and not harder in this work?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at the plans for my county, and kind of going off of what Dr. Grant said and what you said, I couldn't like find this in the plans or anything, but I was wondering about when it comes to like the physical safety of students, talking about like how my county is so small, and then there's counties like PG County, Baltimore County, that they have like stuff like metal detectors, this and that, but then there's not like, it's not equal throughout the entire state of Maryland. Like, what pillar would take care of that to make sure that each school has that, even if like, I guess it'd be a money problem, but at the same time, it kind of plays into like the behavioral problem, because I guess counties that aren't seen as like having big, I don't know, like violence and stuff, they don't really get looked at, but it's a problem everywhere.
So I think it's a twofold part. So safety, I think, is ingrained throughout the blueprint because you have to have a safe learning environment for a lot of this to happen. But I think what you're actually addressing is probably some things that come through the Maryland Safe and Secure team, where they literally have grants and different things that your LEA can apply for that address some of the things that you're talking about around safety. I was just on a meeting yesterday where LEA, they are applying for the one for a school resource officer for their particular area because they don't have that actually right now. And so they want that to actually have someone who is a community builder and then also has that presence of safety. So that's part of it. With the blueprint, I just want to make sure that we highlight that the blueprint is more so around the internal needs and work of those that are trying to create that learning environment for the students. And so the safety part should be something that is addressed even beforehand of the blueprint. So we should be addressing safety at a different land, but I will actually send you that information. So then you as a student leader can have some of that information about some of those grants, and then you can get on that listserv. And I think then you'll be able to see the connection between these other agencies and the blueprint. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so we're at 5 o'clock, and I know we had the agenda to go to 5:15, but I don't believe in holding if we don't have anything else to say necessarily. So I'll just kind of go through like our action items. We are looking to see if the special education work group can come to our meeting on October 22nd. We as committee members will take time to go through the LEA plans for Pillar 4 and go a little bit deeper in there and then come back with our wonderings across the plans with Pillar 4. And then making sure that when we also have the special education work group, if possible, someone from Pillar 2 might just touch base on the recruitment around teachers with the focus being special education teachers, to kind of just tie those together. We also looked at making sure that eventually we want to have someone come and talk to us about the neighborhood indicators of poverty and what are we using to count poverty, along with the multilingual work group coming to speak to us. And then eventually in the spring, governance and accountability just giving us their work group giving us a little bit of understanding of where their committee is and next steps with that particular work group. Is it anything that I missed? And so that meeting is October 22nd. It will be from 4 to 5:30. So we have a little bit more time to unpack. And it's already should be on everyone's calendar. And if it's not, just let me know and I can forward it to you. Everybody's got it? Good. So at this time, if there's
Sounds good, Hope.
If nothing else is needed, then we can stop our meeting at 5:02 today and then come back on October 22nd. And we hope you guys have a safe time in the meantime. Make sure to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great one.